do to me.
It wasn't my
Right,
eyes.
and you are live.
When you should, when you put it on and.
Welcome to my neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in my neighborhood.
When he was
Won't
working
you
as a
be my
detective,
neighbor?
all of his shows had the triangles with the.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, test. Look at that. Just comes right up there.
Nice, nice and crisp.
Crisp!
Go and shows.
Hello, all of you out there in Facebook land. We're going to start our Bibli study, our bibliothèque study. That'd be a library, wouldn't it?
Yes. Leave us a comment so we know you're here.
Be
please.
serious? My wife's telling me to be serious.
Oh, please.
I don't know how to be serious.
You're going to be talking about voodoo. How serious can you
I know, I can't get serious. I want to talk about voodoo because it's kind of a scary thing.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, Margaret.
So we are going to be talking about voodoo tonight. And what does voodoo have anything to do with Christianity? They're completely different religions, so why are we including them in this series? Well, it's because there's been a lot of synchronization between Catholicism and voodoo. So we have to talk about these things and how it got here and what it means to us. So I've got a lot of material to cover, so we're going to get started right off the bat. I asked the Lord to protect everybody because this is black magic and it's not healthy. So pray up, stay prayed up, don't let the bed bugs bite. So voodoo is a spiritual practice and it dates back thousands and thousands of years, uniting people from the African diaspora. We have a Jewish diaspora, we have an African diaspora, people who were forced to leave their homelands basically. Voodoo is much more involved than just misrepresenting exercises involving voodoo dolls and witchcraft, which is what the media loves to portray, but that's really a very small part of voodoo. Here are some fun facts about voodoo that you might not know. Voodoo is a combination of practices. It is a spiritual expression that combines traditional religion with animism and spiritism, and joins indigenous African peoples together. Voodooism's two worlds. It believes in two interrelated worlds, one visible and one invisible. It is in death that we are brought to the visible world. It is in death that we are brought to the invisible world where our ancestors serve as guides and protectors. Where'd you hear that before? You know, Egyptian religions? It has a lot to do with communicating with the spirits. Communicating with lesser spirits known as Iwa, and to the invisible world is done through prayer, animal sacrifice, and drum beats, and dance ceremonies, lots of them. They ask advice, they learn from their experiences and connect with them on a spiritual level. They're talking about dead people here. So where is voodooism practiced? Well, voodoo is the most popular and practiced in West Africa. It's also in Haiti and Louisiana, and in places that hold the remnants of West African slavery, such as Cuba, Brazil, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. Voodooism is a community religion rooted in healing and doing good to others if they're a benevolent group, or doing evil to others if they're a malevolent group. It's the source of strength for African slaves who had to endure fierce conditions when they found themselves uprooted and forced around the world as chattel. There are sects of voodoo that practice malevolent spell castings, believing that the more pain, ashe, they cause their victims, the more power they will have. They create power from pain. So, how voodooism foreshadowed Haiti's revolt and independence. A voodoo priest by the name of Dutty Doukman, D-O-U-K-M-A-N, started the Haitian Revolution of 1791 after stating prophecies that certain slaves that he named would be the leaders of the resistance movement and they would free other slaves. And this was seen as the catalyst for the subsequent slave revolt that occurred in Haiti. Now, there's been attempts to ban voodoo. In 1685, France banned any practice of the African religion in its colonies. Slaves had to be converted to Christianity within 8 days of their arrival with their baptisms taking place. But that didn't stop the religion. It only stopped the obvious practice of the religion. And what it did was it simply merged the newly adopted Catholicism with voodoo. And it gave the impression of a conversion that didn't really happen. Sort of like when they forced the Jews to convert. Now the word voodoo comes from the West African Fon people, F-O-N, from southern Benin, which means spiritual entity. Voodoo practitioners have historically survived several attempts of others trying to subdue the religion by the burning of shrines and forcing conversions into Christianity and different religions, including Islam, and beating its clergy. But they are now protected in Haiti, thanks to the 1987 Haitian Constitution. The practice of voodoo is legitimate and allowed in Haiti. Now, one of the biggest urban legends of the voodoo religion is that they have these voodoo dolls that they stick pins into to cause people pain and suffering. And there is a portion of that that is true, but most of that comes out of Hollywood. It's popular culture in Hollywood. The dolls pertain to a type of African folk magic called hoodoo, H-O-O-D-O-O, hoodoo. And they have very little place in the religion of voodoo or voodoo. So it's not used by the majority of practitioners. But dance, music, sacrifices, all of that is used by them. Now the purpose of the voodoo religion to the practitioner is to protect and serve. There's several different sects of voodooism. And the traditional voodoo guardians in the night in Togo and Benin are called Zang Beto, and they patrol the streets in outfits that resemble haystacks. You'll see this next week when Mark shows you pictures of all this stuff. And they're the primary law enforcement in these areas until the establishment of official law and order or police. But literally, there are people dressed as giant haystacks that walk the streets to give protection. Now, it's the Yoruba, Y-O-R-U-B-A, Yoruba people of West Africa who are the biggest practitioners of voodoo. And this includes Nigeria, Ghana, and the other sects of the West African continent. And they've been doing this religion for centuries. But the Yoruba religion is a blend of indigenous beliefs, myths, legends, proverbs, and songs, all influenced by the cultural and social contexts of Western Africa. So let's get some key takeaways of this religion, the Yoruba religion of voodoo. It includes the concept of Ashe, a powerful life force possessed by humans and divine beings alike. Ashe is the energy found in all people and in all natural things. Much like the Catholic saints, the Yoruba Orisha, O-R-I-S-H-A-S, Orisha, they're emissaries of God, and I'm using a little g for God because it's not our God. But the main god of the voodoo practice of the Yoruba people has many different names. Olodumare is one of their favorites, Olodumare, O-L-O-D-U-M-A-R-E. But he has another name too, Babalu, Babaluai. There's other names for him. But you remember as a kid when you'd watch I Love Lucy and Ricky Ricardo, we banging on his drum, calling out for Babalu, Babaluai. He's calling on a voodoo god. And us kids would go out and scream for these voodoo gods, not understanding what we were actually talking about, which is why you don't practice gibberish in the congregation. So, the voodoo of this god, what happened when they had to start following Catholicism was that they gave their gods our gods' names. So they have Babalu, or Olodumare, the head god. He's God the Father. They have other gods who are God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and all these others. So you'll get pictures of all that next week. But the Yoruba's religious celebrations have a purpose. They promote cultural values and help to preserve the rich heritage of the people who follow them. So here's some basic beliefs. Traditional Yoruba voodoo holds that the people experience Ayanmo, A-Y-A-N-M-O, Ayanmo, which is destiny or fate. And as part of this, there's an expectation that everyone will eventually achieve a state of Olodumare, which is becoming one with the divine creator who is the source of all energy. Where did we see this at?
Yeah.
The Eastern religions, right? So, in the original voodoo belief system, life and death are an ongoing cycle. And the existence of various bodies in Aya, A-Y-E, and the physical realm. And as the spirit gradually moves towards transcendence, again, Eastern religion, right? From West Africa. In other words, voodoo practices, they believe in reincarnation and possession, being possessed by spirits, both good and bad, good and evil. You'll see pictures of a lot of this stuff next week. In addition to being in this state, this spiritual state, Olodumare is the name of the divine supreme being who's the creator of all things. I told you they conflag him with God the Father. So Olodumare is known as Olorun. He's the all-powerful figure, and it isn't limited to gender constraints. Usually they use the pronoun they when describing Olodumare, who doesn't typically meddle in the affairs of his people, his existence, the mere mortals that are beyond him. If someone wishes to communicate with Olodumare, they do so by asking the Orisha to intercede on their behalf. So, the creation story, according to Voodoo, is that Babaluai, who is also known as Omulu, Obaleyu, Obalei, there's lots of different names for him. He's God the Father of the earth. He's the biggest, strongest, most powerful Orisha. And he's associated with infectious disease and the healing in the Yoruba religion of Voodoo, including body, wealth, and physical possessions. Who was the creator of the universe? Who gives us everything? God the Father. So the Voodoo religion has its own unique creation story. So here's how Voodoo people believe that the world was created. Okay. Olorun, who is also Babaluai, God the Father, okay, again, he has a lot of names. He lived in the sky with the other Orishas, the lesser gods and goddesses. The lesser goddesses are called Olokun, O-L-O-K-U-N. But this goddess was the ruler of the water below. And another being, Obatala, asked Olorun for permission to create dry land for the creatures living upon the water. And Obatala took a bag and filled it with sand, filled snail shell and white hen, a black cat, and a palm nut. He threw the bag over his shoulder and he climbed down from the heavens on a gold chain. When he ran out of chain, he poured the sand beneath him. And he released the white hen, who began pecking at the sand and began spreading it around to create hills and valleys. He then planted the palm nut, which grew into a tree and multiplied, and Obatala made even wine from these nuts. And one day, after drinking a bit of the palm wine, which I think he did before this story too, Obatala got bored and lonely and fashioned creatures out of clay. Where do we hear this from? Biblical story, right? God created the clay, Adam out of clay. But many of which of his creations were flawed and imperfect. And thus mankind was created. Finally, the Voodoo religion, again, like I said, it talks about Ashe, which is a powerful life force possessed by humans and other things alike. And it's included in things like rain and thunder and blood and people. And this concept is like the chi in Asian spirituality, that of the chakras in the Hindu belief, okay? So let's talk a little bit about their deities in Orisha. Scary pictures. So much like the saints of Catholicism, the Voodoo Orishas work as intermediaries between man and the supreme creator of the world and the rest of the divine world. And while they often act on behalf of mortals, the Orisha sometimes work against humans and cause problems for us. Now, there are a number of different kinds of Orisha in the Vodun religion. Again, some of the Vodun religions are benevolent. They only do prayers to help people, sometimes against these very gods that are trying to destroy them. And sometimes they pray that they're malevolent, they're evil, and so they pray that you'll be inhabited by evil spirits or that bad things will happen to you. So, but they are transcended into a state of semi-divineness. Some Orishas appear in the form of natural features like rivers, mountains, trees, or other environmental markers. And these things are very important in the Vodun religion. You'll find altars set up in these specific locations of rivers, near running water and trees and such. The Orishas exist in a way very much like human beings do. They party, go to Orisha party. They eat and they drink, they love and they marry, they enjoy music. A lot of music. In a way, the Orishas serve as a reflection of mankind itself. In addition to the Orishas, there's also the Ojogun, A-J-O-G-U-N, Ojogun. And they represent negative forces in the universe. An Ojogun might be the cause of an illness like COVID, or an accident as well as other calamities. These are the bad spirits. And they're responsible for all sorts of problems attributed to the demons of the Christian faith. Again, there's a lot of synchronization between Christianity and Vodun because these people were forced into Christianity by Catholicism, and so they adapted. They didn't convert, they adapted their practice. So most people try to avoid the Ojogun, obviously, who is afflicted by one and might be sent to an Ifa, I-F-A, Ifa, or priest, to perform a divination and determine how to get rid of the Ojogun. So, just so you know, there is a way to get rid of them. Typically in the Vodun religion, most issues can be explained by either the work of an Ojogun or the failure to pay proper respects to an Orisha. You see, they must be placated, much like the Greek gods of ancient Greece. Every Orisha has a favorite food, a favorite color, a favorite liquid, a favorite everything. And if you don't placate them, they can cause trouble in your life. So we're going to look at some of the practices that, it's just, you're not going to be able to see this well, but this is one of the haystacks that are out protecting and working on, it's okay, I'm just showing it for a quick second. Just because I've got pictures in this proceeding, it's kind of scary.
Yep.
If I saw that thing running around, I'd be like, what? How's that going to protect me? Anyway, Mark will show you all these nice pictures next week. It's estimated that some 20% of the West African people practice these traditional religion of their ancestors. And in addition to honoring their god Orun and the Orishas, the followers of Voodoo often participate in celebrations which sacrifices are offered to different gods. They try to tell you they're monotheistic, but they have gods, plural, lesser gods. Gods that control things like rain, sunshine, harvest, fertility. Again, we see this in other fake religions, not our faith. But during the Vodun religious festivals, participants are intensely involved in ritualistic reenactment of folk tales, myths, and other events that help explain mankind's place in the cosmos. So for a Vodun to avoid participating in these ceremonies would be essentially to turn his back on his ancestors and the spirits and the gods, little g. Festivals are a time in which family, life, dress, language, ancestors, spirits, dance are all celebrated and expressed side by side with their spiritual belief. It's a time of building community. It's sort of the same thing we do in Christianity or faith, but for very different reasons. The religious festival may include ceremonies to mark births, marriages, deaths, as well as initiations and other rites of passage. Now, during the annual Ifa, I-F-A, celebration, which falls in the time of the yam harvest, yams being very important to these Yoruba people, there's a giant feast with dancing and drumming and other forms of music, all folded into this ritual celebration. And prayers are said to ward off the premature deaths and to protect the protection and blessing of the entire village for the coming year. Sounds a bit like Yom Kippur.
Yeah, that's weird.
The festival of Ogun, Ogun, takes place on an annual basis, involves sacrifices as well, and prior to the ritual and celebration, priests take a vow to abstain from cursing, fighting, sex, and eating certain foods so they can be seen worthy of Ogun. Their priests get to cuss. They're lucky, man.
Yeah, but they don't get sex.
They get to fight. Well, only during this one time.
Oh.
When it's festival time and make an offering, the offerings of snails, cola nuts, palm oil, pigeons, and dogs, that's going to get Peter upset, to soothe Ogun's destructive wrath. Voodoo religious celebrations have a social purpose. Like I said, they promote cultural values and help to enrich the heritage of the people that follow them. Now, many of these voodoo practitioners, like I said, they've become Christians, I'll put that in air quotes, and Muslims, I'll put that in air quotes too. And they've done this because they need to coexist with their neighbors who are practicing Christians and Muslims. So the Christian church has compromised by blending their annual programming into the indigenous celebrations of the harvest, while traditional Voodoo or Yoruba people are celebrating their gods. For instance, their Christian friends and family may be making offerings of thanks to their own God. But people come together for this dual faith celebration. They're mixing Christianity or Islam with Voodoo. And they offer prayers of mercy and protection and blessing for very different types of deities, but for the good of the entire community. But before interfaith service. But before we get all high and mighty, traditional Christianity does the same thing with pagans. We celebrate Christmas and Easter, which are not biblical festivals, which came out of paganism, and we blended them into Christianity for the sake of bringing people from paganism to Christianity. So, I mean, anytime you change anything of our faith and practice, in my humble opinion, it's wrong, but we know that the church is completely involved with Christmas and Easter, and they're not mentioned anywhere in the scriptures as something to worship God. So, unlike many Western religious beliefs, the Yoruba, the Voodoo people, spiritually emphasize living a good life. And like Eastern religions, reincarnation is a process, a part of this process, and something to be looked forward to. Only those who live a victorious, virtuous, and good existence earn the privilege of reincarnation. Those who are unkind or deceitful don't get to be reborn. And children are often seen as the reincarnated spirits of their ancestors who have crossed over. And this concept of a familial reincarnation has a name. It's called Atunwa. A-T-U-N-W-A, Atunwa. Even the Yoruba people's names like Batatande, which means father returns, and Yetunde, mother returns, are reflected in this kind of reincarnation within one's own family. So it's almost like the Yahwistic naming of children, like Jeremiah or Yeshua or Netanyahu, putting Yahweh's names into the people. Now, the other thing that's not important in the Voodoo religion is gender. And this has been a very big pull for some women who see that they have equality in the religious leadership, because when it comes to reincarnation, it's believed that you can change gender with each new birth, with each rebirth. When a new child is born and as a reincarnated being, they carry not only the wisdom of their ancestor soul, but that they possessed before, but they also accumulate knowledge of their various lifetimes. And they can come back as male or female, it doesn't matter. Now, although it's most commonly found in the western part of Africa, in countries like Nigeria, Benin, and Togo, for the past several decades, Voodoo religion has also been making its way to the United States, where it is resonating among many black Americans. And many people find themselves drawn to voodoo because it offers them a chance to connect spiritually with the heritage that predates colonization and the transatlantic slave trade. In addition, voodoo has significant influence on other beliefs that are considered part of African diaspora. The African traditional religions like Santeria, Candomblé, Trinidad Orisha can all trace their roots back to the beliefs and practices of Yoruba land, where the original Yoruba people came. In Brazil, enslaved Yoruba people brought their traditions with them. They synchronized them with Catholicism of their owners and formed the Umbanda religion. Umbanda, U-M-B-A-N-D-A, Umbanda, which blends African orishas and beings with Catholic saints and the indigenous concepts of ancestral spirits. So you can see the farther you go, the more weird it gets. Now, what are your chances of running into a practitioner of voodoo here in this area? Well, actually, it's kind of high.
Go to the dollar store.
Go to the dollar store, you'll see all the candles with the different voodoo gods on it with the Catholic names of the saints on them too. And it'll have the color that the Orisha likes, and it'll have the picture of the food that the Orisha likes, and it'll have the item that the Orisha likes, and they're synchronized, okay? And there's a lot of it because we have, in the Washington, D.C. area, we have a lot of foreigners from these different countries. But let me read you a story. This came from a newspaper article, and it's about a practice that they are gathering up in Baltimore County. They gathered in a clearing by the stream in Baltimore County one chilly early spring day, some in colorful African head ties known as geles, G-E-L-E-S, others wearing bracelets trimmed in shells or carved in wood. One by one, they stepped forward to toss offerings into Gwynn's Fall, a pineapple, 4 oranges, a bouquet of tulips. When the lead priestess of the African-American women dropped a handful of shells to the ground and scrutinized their pattern, a message came through. Their celebration of the spring equinox was blessed by the divine. The river goddess, Osun, O-S-U-N, has accepted our gifts, said the priestess. A Mount Washington resident and longtime practitioner of Ifa, a West African faith of voodoo. She prefers to be called Olorai, O-L-O-R-I, the name she is known within the faith. She and other members of the group regard it as disrespectful to discuss their faith using what they call their government names. Ifa is one of an interrelated network of religions with African roots, including voodoo, Santeria, Sango baptism, that appear to be gaining popularity in the United States, including Maryland, as some African Americans seek spiritual experiences firmly grounded in their own cultural heritage. Olorai, a Coppin State graduate and entrepreneur, earned her initiation as a priestess while visiting the Benin Republic 2 decades ago. She has since earned the status of Ayanifa, or Mother of Wisdom, the equivalent of a high priestess within their faith. A single mother, she is an elder of Dautas, D-A-W-T-A-S, Dautas of the Moon, a group of more than a dozen women who practice Ifa and related African faiths. They gather along Gwynn's Falls in Villanova Park in Pikesville this month in observance of the equinox, a day when they represent the rebirth of nature's vitality. Scholars say it's hard to know exactly how many Americans practice Ifa, or if many other African faiths that boast overlapping rituals and traditions. Many keep their involvement private, and numbers are hard to keep track of that membership in faiths that can be defined in a variety of ways. But anecdotal evidence suggests interest in West African religion is on the rise. Now, these traditions are indeed growing in the United States, says Albert Waaku, a professor at Florida International University who specializes in African and Caribbean religions. They have a strong appeal to groups of African Americans who have been struggling with questions of identity, who don't feel they fit so well in the American system. They're especially appealing to women who tend to hold more powerful positions within the African traditions than within Western cultures. Organized in Baltimore 5 years ago, the Daughtahs have held a national gathering for African American women interested in their religion every October since 2016. The first drew 150 people, some from as far away as Canada and California. Last year, 300.
Wow.
The organizers are preparing for more this fall. Olori adds that hundreds of men and women attend some of the more popular Ifa events in the Baltimore, Washington area. Wuaku says strong bases of West African religions have emerged in California, Florida, Michigan, and other places around the country. There have been times on this path when I've thought, am I crazy? When it happens enough, you don't argue with what you see and hear. The African religious traditions provide a symbol around which its followers can integrate, he said. That's one reason there's such a powerful draw. So Ifa is a faith and divination system with its roots in Olori's family ancestral homeland of Yorubaland. The region now encompasses the nations of Benin, Togo, Ghana, and parts of Nigeria. Like some other religions, Ifa includes magic, the use of traditional medicines, and the veneration of the dead. Like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, Ifa is monotheistic. But its supreme creative figure, Oludumare, again, same god of the Voodoo, shares power with dozens of subsidiary deities, thus not making it monotheistic.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they call themselves monotheistic, because they're clearly believing in several deities. Now, each subsidiary deity represents a particular element of life or nature: fire, rebirth or reincarnation, agriculture, arts, fertility, and serves as an intercessor between humans and the Creator. It is through ritualistic practice that believers can access the deity's wisdom and counsel. They have incantations, prayers, and divination, as in Olori's reading of the mollusk shells that she threw and then had to read them. And they are believed to summon the deities, or these practitioners of the ancestors, who may speak to them in dreams, in audible sounds, or even in conversation, appearing in-person visits. The Daughtahs say embracing such mystical realities to them, can feel strange at first, but it becomes a life-affirming norm. There's a picture of the lady here. She looks really quite normal, but this is what she believes. Her name is Ayawo Orisa Omitolo, Omitola. Now, think about this. Her profession is a doula, a midwife in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And she founded the Daughtahs of the Moon after having a dream suggesting the idea, recently pledged as an Orisha priestess, dedicated to Yemoja, Y-E-M-O-J-A, a deity associated with rebirth, moon, and water. The 46-year-old mother of four says she's often visited by the deity as well as her own forebears. She is certain they're real and have her best interest at heart, whether they're consoling, directing, or rebuking her. Quote, "I consider myself a rational person, and there have been times on this path when I've thought, am I crazy? Did I hear that? Did I feel that? Did I see that?" She says, "But talking to ancestors has a totally objective reality for me. When it happens enough, you don't argue with what you see and hear." End quote. Their counsel, she says, has helped her learn everything from better prayer and meditation habits to improved personal accountability, all the while bolstering her health, helping her make career choices, and rounding out her spiritual life. She says, "Ifa has taught me that God is not just something that lives in the sky. God is in all of us."
Uh-oh.
Yeah, there you go again. The faith, like others with African roots, has defied the odds by surviving at all, let alone making it to the United States. Historians say that when Western European nations such as Belgium and France began colonizing Africa, they viewed indigenous religions as pagan at best, demonic at worst, and responded by spreading a triumphalist form of Christianity that powerfully eroded traditional practices. I just want to say, though, can you imagine if you're about to give birth to your child and you happen to pick this woman as your midwife, that you would have someone who practices voodoo bringing your baby into the world? People ask questions when you go to doctors. Ask questions when you go to practitioners of anything. Make sure that what they practice isn't going to be offensive to your spirit, to your God. I'm just saying. Africans who have venerated male and female deities who look like them were introduced to white male figures, white male religious figures, and they were told they only had one intercessor, Jesus, and that's who mattered. That legacy, Olarai says, is why many of the African diaspora still consider Christianity more an agent of oppression than of liberation. Even when she visited West Africa in 1999 to 2000, she says it was hard to find followers of the indigenous religions of voodoo outside of the small Beninese communities that took part in the Ifa initiation rites that made her a priestess. Quote, in many places you have to hunt far and wide for traditionalists, she says. You have people in Nigeria who tell you that you're going straight to hell. You have people in America who tell you that too.
Yeah.
The uncounted numbers of Yorubians and other West Africans who were captured and sold during the translate slave practice practiced their faith in secret, often at night. But the tradition survived in altered forms, such as Santeria in Cuba, Voodoo in Haiti, Sango baptism in Trinidad, all following adopted elements of Catholicism, Baptists, and other faith traditions already established in those places. So the practitioners of these faiths began arriving in the New York area about 1950 and spread throughout the eastern United States. But Olarori says it wasn't until decades later that many African Americans could afford to fly west and meet the elders of the Ifa face to face. A U.S.-born African voodoo priest, Baba Asarjemin Adifunmi, established the traditional voodoo Yoruban village in Beaufort County, South Carolina, in the 1970s, creating the first significant beachhead for Ifa and other West African voodoo religions and traditions in the U.S. Olarai was in her 20s and was curious when she was led to this village, a place where the priests carry out rites that predate Christianity by thousands of years. During one stay, she and a friend visited a nearby plantation, and Olarai says she was alarmed to realize she had many priestesses possess. She had many of the powers that priestesses possess. She could see dead people. Wasn't that a movie?
I see dead people.
Near the servants' quarters behind the mansion, she said, she spotted a man leaning against a tree, an elder, an old slave. I started talking to him as if I could see him as clearly as day. Olarai's friend, who had been working on the history of that place, later told her those and other details synced up with what she had learned in her research. Well, that's a pretty easy get, isn't it? Oh, there was an old slave man here who worked at this place. Yeah, any plantation that was in that area probably had older slave men that were working there. So that's, to me, that almost seems like something you could just count on happening, right? This is the part of the article I found most disturbing. Raised in a devout Christian home in northwest Baltimore, Olarai says the faith simply never resonated with her and failed to reward her curiosity. I'd ask my grandmother questions. Did Adam and Eve come before the dinosaurs? Where do women come into play? Again, I told you, it's about power for women. Why doesn't any one of the people in the Bible look like us? I'm sorry, my Bible didn't come with pictures of the people. If Jesus is real, why do we never see him? Nobody had answers. I'm not knocking Christianity, she says. It works for many people, but to me, it felt very empty. I thought, there has to be more than this.
Can she see your God?
So, Iyawo Orisa and Fuyale Ogunsina, I'm sure I've mispronounced that terribly, but understand this. It's a 32-year-old Navy veteran from Odenton, Maryland, grew up attending a Baptist church 3 times a week. But she said Christianity offered no explanation of the odd sensations she often experienced, like smelling cigarette smoke when no one was around, for example, or hearing music others couldn't hear. We have a name for that stuff. Recently initiated as an Orisha priestess, one who has been called to serve in the faith but remains at the early stage of development, she now believes they were her ancestors trying to connect with her. She says the deceased uncle on her mother's side, known to have been a heavy chain smoker, frequently visits her in her dreams. He has a reassuring presence, she said. Olori says Ifa helped her make sense of the world, made a real spiritual impact, and brought me back to myself as a spiritual being, an African American and a woman. As a priestess, she established a small house of worship in her home about 7 years ago, and the group now numbers about 15 regulars who range in age from their 20s to their 70s. I'm doing what I was brought into this world to be, she says. For the equinox celebration, that meant helping oversee things streamside. Olori said a prayer in Yoruba, then in English, and asked whether the deity was pleased with the offering they had made. On the first of 3 tosses of the divination shells, she said the answer came back no. She made adjustments, moving people and objects around, and finally the woman dumped honey into Gwyn's fall for sweetness, a sensation the deities are said to enjoy. And the reply came back affirmative. It's amazing those shells have so much intelligence. There's another type of voodoo called candomblé. I'm sure it's French pronunciation and I'm butchering it, but it means dance in honor of the gods. And it's a religion that combines elements from African cultures, including the Yoruba, the Bantu, and the Fon, as well as some elements of Catholicism. Do you see the theme through all this? Mixing with Catholicism. And the indigenous South American beliefs. Developed in Brazil by enslaved Africans, it's based on the oral tradition and includes a wide range of rituals, including ceremonies, dance, animal sacrifices, and personal worship. While the candomblé was once a hidden religion, its membership has now grown significantly and is practiced by at least 2 million people in Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Uruguay, and Paraguay. Now, the followers of this religion believe in a pantheon of gods which serve a single all-powerful deity. Individuals have personal deities, sort of like our guardian angels, who inspire and protect them as they pursue their own individual destinies. The candomblé is a religion in which combines the African indigenous with aspects of Catholicism. It was brought in to Brazil and the Portuguese Empire by these enslaved West Africans. So here's a little bit of the history of it. They initially are called Batuque, B-A-T-U-Q-U-E, and emerged from the culture of enslaved Africans brought to Brazil by the Portuguese Empire between 1550 and 1888. The religion was an amalgamation of the West African Voodoo, or Yoruba religion, Fon, Igbo, Congo, Iwi, and Batu systems of belief intertwined with indigenous American traditions and some of the rituals and beliefs of Catholicism. The first temple was built in Bahia, Brazil in the 19th century. But it has been practiced for several hundred years. So here's how the enslaved Africans were assumed to be practicing Catholics, and it was important to maintain the appearance of worshiping according to the Portuguese expectations. The Catholic practice of praying to saints was not rationally or radically different from the polytheistic practices that originated in Africa. Yeah. This is why you only have one intercessor between man and God, and that is Yeshua. For example, Yemenia, the sea goddess, is sometimes associated with the Virgin Mary, while the brave warrior Ogum is similar to St. George. In some cases, images of Bantu, the Bantu gods, were secretly hidden inside statues of Catholic saints. While enslaved Africans appeared to be praying to Catholic saints, they were in fact practicing candomblé. The practice, it says, many of the enslaved Africans brought to Brazil had been raised as Muslims in Africa, and many of the beliefs and rituals associated with Islam were thus integrated into this religion as well in some areas of Brazil. Muslim practitioners of candomblé, like the practitioners of Islam, follow the practices of worshiping on Fridays. And Muslim practitioners of candomblé were major figures in the slave revolts and identified themselves during the revolutionary reaction. They dressed in traditional Muslim garb, the white garments and skull caps with the amulets. I've got a lot of information on these, but their practice and belief, they have no sacred text. It's believed that its rituals are entirely of the oral traditions. All forms of the belief include Olodumare. Who's that? The head god, the god of creation, right? And a supreme being and 16 Orixas, or sub-deities. There are, however, 7 candomblé nations, variations based on location of the West African ancestry and local practitioners, and each nation worships slightly different of the gods that they have. But unlike many Western religions, it does not have a distinction between good and evil. Rather, the practitioners are urged only to fulfill their destiny to the fullest. Whether it's to be evil to the fullest. If it's to be good to the fullest. The individual's destiny may be ethical or unethical. The behavior doesn't have negative consequences. Unethical behavior does not have negative consequences. If you're meant to be evil, then you should be the best at being evil. Individuals determine their destiny when they are possessed by their ancestor spirits, or Egum, E-G-U-M, usually during the special ritual that is involving a dancing ceremony. They too believe in Ashe, power given in a life force. And when they die, believers are buried in the earth, never cremated, so that they can prove the Ashe. They can provide Ashe to all living creatures. I'm going to skip a lot of this stuff because there's more stuff I want to talk to you about. Their rituals and ceremonies, they worship in temples, which have indoor and outdoor spaces as well as special places for their gods. Prior to entering, worshipers must wear clean clothes and be ritually washed. This might come out of their Islamic background. While worshipers may come to the temple to have their fortunes told, share a meal, or for other reasons, they typically go for ritual worship services. The ritual worship service starts with a period during which priests and initiates prepare for the event. Preparation includes washing costumes, decorating the temple in the colors that the Orishas are going to be honored. It depends on which Orisha they're honoring. Preparing food, conducting divinations, and in some cases making animal sacrifices. When the main part of the service begins, children reach out to the Orishas, and they fall into trances. Worship then includes music and dance, but no homilies. Choreographed dances, called capoeira, are a way to call the individual gods, deities. When the dances are at their most ecstatic, the dancers have the Orishas enter their bodies, sending the worshiper into a trance. The god dances alone and then leaves the worshiper's body when certain hymns are sung. When the ritual is complete, the worshipers share a banquet. Yay. There's another very prominent Voodoo practice called Obeah, O-B-E-A-H, Obeah. The most prominent examples are the Creolinized Caribbean spiritual system. They play a large role in the daily lives of many slaves. Voodoo is sometimes referred to as Voodoo. It's the same practice. but it became more popularly known to the 19th and 20th century Americans as voodoo. Now, scholars and practitioners prefer to spell it V-O-D-O-U, voodoo, because of the negative stereotypes attached to the Americanized spelling of V-O-O-D-O-O, voodoo, which the general public often associates with zombies, primitivism, and bad horror movies.
I saw it on Gilligan's once.
And Gilligan's Island once had it too.
Yeah.
But anything incomprehensible, okay? So voodoo must also be referred to as hoodoo or conjure, a term that describes the various sorts of African American folk magic in the southeastern United States that was popularized by blues music in the early 20th century. Although some hoodoo rituals have had similar African roots of voodoo, many have been influenced by voodoo that was carried into New Orleans and other southern city ports by the Haitian slaves. And so there's a significant difference in how they're practiced. Foremost among them, the fact that voodoo is a structured religious system, whereas hoodoo is more of an umbrella term for many often unrelated practices and beliefs. But slaves who found themselves transported to this new life in the Caribbean made adaptations to survive. And one of these adaptations was the synchronization, we hear that a lot, of religious beliefs. Some with the other types of voodoo and some with Catholicism. Walter Rucker notes in his 2001 article, in the Caribbean, these African elements were attached to Roman Catholic practices, perhaps initially as a means of disguising spiritual activities from slave owners, but eventually as a synthesis. African deities and Catholic saints became to believers different incarnations of the same beings. This is why it's so important to know how to do this. There was a lawyer, Médéric Louis Elie. Anyway, he said this. He was visiting Santo Domingo in 1797. He said, then the crowd makes way and each person comes in to implore the voodoo according to his or her needs and following the order of their seniority in the sect. The majority ask for the ability to control the spirit of their masters, but that's not enough. One asks for more money, another for the ability to please an uninterested woman. This one to bring back an unfaithful mistress. Another wants to heal quickly or live a long life. There is no passion which does not produce a wish. Even those planning crimes do not always disguise their prayers for success. At each of these convocations, the voodoo king meditates. The spirit moves within him. Suddenly he takes a box with a snake in it. He places it on the ground and has the voodoo queen stand on it. As soon as the sacred sanctuary is underneath her, she becomes a new python, penetrated by God. She moves her entire body in a convulsive state, and the oracle speaks through her mouth. Sometimes she flatters and promises happiness. Sometimes she thunders and explodes with reproaches. After all the questions have been received and responses have given from the oracle, which is also sometimes ambiguous, a circle is formed and the snake is placed back on the altar. It is in that moment when each person brings an offering which they have sought to make worthy of her. After this, the voodoo dance begins. So, to a person seeing a voodoo worship service, it can be quite scary.
Snakes comes out, I'm out of here.
Yep. I do have, let me tell you this, I got 72 pages here, and I'm only on page 35, so that can tell you why we're not going to get to all of it. Because there's so many different, it would be like trying to teach you all about all the different sects of Christianity in one night, and I can't do that. But in the time that we have left, I do want to explain some of these other things to you that are important. There's a priesthood, okay, and these priesthoods are the spouses of the Loa. Now, Loas are spirits. So, there's a hierarchy of Loas, of spirits. And what happens, ceremonies involve around dancing and song and playing of drums, and it gets to be really rhythmic. And it also escalates. So you have this really powerful music. I mean, we understand music brings out emotion, right? You're seeing a scary movie, they're playing scary music to scare you. They're sad, they're playing sad music to make you sad. They're happy, they have happy music to make you happy. We know that music touches our emotions, okay? So these ceremonies revolve around this dance and this drumming, and the priest and the devotees, the laos, the spirits, are together forming this spiritual community. And then laos enter into or mount devotees during ceremonies. And the individual is thus possessed and referred to as a horse, and serves as a mouthpiece for the spirit, imparting knowledge to the assembly. Now, prominent Loa spirits include Legba, or Papa Legba, represented as an old man with a crutch. And Legba is the gatekeeper, the guardian of homes and roads. He is perhaps the most important Leo, or god, for devotees who can have an open communication with him. You see, you can't go right to Babalu. You got to start with the lesser god and get permission to go on to the next higher god and the next higher god before you can ever talk to God the Father. So they have Agui, or Admiral Agui, a Loa of the sea and all marine life. He is represented by Saint Ulrich, holding a fish. His chua, or horses, must be prevented from throwing themselves into the water and then drowning when he mounts them. He is sometimes appeased by throwing white sheep into the sea. You have Erzuli Frida, who appears as a flirty and beautiful light-skinned Creole woman who adores luxury and love. Her favorite offerings include sweets and mild cigarettes. Those mounted by her, no matter their gender, will often flirt with men and invite kisses and caresses. Again, gender means nothing in this religion. You have Bawan Samdi, or in the French, Baron Samamdi, or Baron Saturday. For those lesser spirits associated with him personify the world of the dead. Bawan Samdi is often unruly or lewd. He's a teenage boy. And prefers dark-skinned initiates over the lighter-skinned. His jokes are most often pulled on the upper class. His devotees wear top hats, frock coats, and sunglasses. You have Danbala, the serpent. His wife, Aida Wido, is the rainbow. Danbala is master of marshes and rivers and of silver. His food offering must be all white, like marshmallows. His devotees sometimes behave like snakes when mounted by him. He is represented by St. Patrick or Moses.
That's ironic.
Really, St. Patrick is the one that made the snakes go away.
He's renowned for having cast the snakes out of Ireland.
Right.
There you go. Well, that's why he's associated with him. You have Erzuli, Danto, the sister of Izuli Frida, represented as a dark-skinned, lower-class woman. She can either appear in the guise of a loving mother or as a red-eyed woman with a knife. Her offering includes raw rum and unfiltered Camel cigarettes. I told you, each deity has its own color, its own food, its own item that it likes.
When did camels get to be invented?
Well, I don't know what they smoked before camels were invented, but she apparently has made it clear she likes unfiltered Camel cigarettes. And let's talk about the zombie thing. I wanted to make sure we touch on the zombies because this is a big part of voodoo. So non-devotees are usually less attracted by the systemization and the rituals outlined above. They're more about being attracted to the sensationalism and frequently stereotyped sorcery-related practices that are peripheral to voodoo and Haitian life, but are really just magnified by Hollywood. Those aspects, in many cases, have more in common with folk magic than with the structured religion of voodoo. And the zombie, however, has played a prominent role in Haitian culture. Now, zombies are not the flesh-eating ghouls of Hollywood. A zombie in the voodoo religion is a person. They are people who are caught between life and death. perhaps as a result of a spell or a potion or becoming mounted by a deity and becoming a horse. But they are empty vessels in the hands of the sorcerer who ensnared them. So this is what what zombies actually are. So the flesh-eating ghouls of Hollywood are not what are considered voodoo. The Obeah, unlike voodoo, is not an organized religion, nor is it necessarily a community endeavor. Individuals practice Obeah, men or women, often to intercede on behalf of their clients, either through casting spells or healing. The etymology of the word can be linked to the Ashanti term of the wizard or witch, Obayefo or Obeye, O-B-E-Y-E. The Ashanti were the largest group of slaves exported to the British colonies. The French and Spanish preferred the Iwi, as they deemed the Ashanti too rebellious. I've known some Ashantis. They are kind of really harsh people. Thus, Obadiah was predominantly found by the early 17th century in Jamaica, Barbados, and the Bahamas, Antigua, and Suriname. British masters were immediately suspicious when they became aware of the practices. Perhaps the act of purchasing spiritual powers seemed like too much autonomy for a slave or a person. Perhaps the slave owner had a good idea about who that power would be used against.
Yeah.
So, Obeah was strictly forbidden, which might explain why it developed as a one-on-one practice as opposed to a community ritual. In fact, 1788, they enacted a law in Jamaica to prevent the practice of the Obeah because it was so detrimental to the communities. And they stipulated the death penalty for any slave who practiced it or pretended any supernatural powers. Now, Obadiah practitioners are commonly believed to have a gift from birth, although it might not manifest itself until adolescence or adulthood. The skills, mostly herbal, can be learned through an apprenticeship, often with a relative. And those who consult in Obeah, man or woman, usually want to achieve some change in their life. Or they seek a spiritual spell or a potion to effect a change, like love potion number 9. Unlike in voodoo, Obeah spirits or ghosts or duppies, D-U-P-P-I-E-S, duppies, can be harnessed for specific purposes rather than engaged in a symbiotic or revelatory relationship. For example, the spirits can be called upon when one's love is unrequited or when a court case is imminent. And it's usually a one-time transaction. You'll hire one of these Obeah men or women to get you out of something or into something, that either spirit or human. But that involves voodoo. So, the Canadian government, here's an interesting story. This is from 2003. Again, remember that when they inflict pain or suffering on somebody, they believe that they get their ashe, their power from these people. And the more ashe, the more power you get in these malevolent sects of voodoo, the stronger you are in the world. Almos and Paravizini Guibert give a modern-day example of 2 Jamaican bank robbers having emigrated to Canada and killed a young woman in a robbery, who then consult an Obeah man to prevent her from haunting them as a duppy. Because Obeah, at least in the Canadian government's view, is a healing medium rather than a religion, no laws of confidentiality apply, and the men were prosecuted. This illustrates the sort of power Obeah can still have in the eyes of its practitioners. Voodoo, also alive and well, with 80% of Haitians saying they practice. Waves of Haitian immigrants into New Orleans in the 19th century, into southern Florida, and New York and New Jersey in the 20th have led to the religion's firm entrenchment in the United States as well. So there are people who practice these things. Again, there's benevolent and malevolent. Santeria. I'm going to talk a little bit about Santeria. That's the one we're most familiar with. I did all this stuff on the police department. That's why I had to learn it. But Santeria is a fusion between Catholic practices and African folk beliefs. It emerged in Cuba mainly in the 17th century and has been embedded in Cuban society ever since. These days, it's far more prevalent than Catholicism is in Cuba. Santeros outnumber Catholics 8-1. Cuba is still the religious center of Santeria, but the faith has spread to many other countries, including the U.S. Santeria's roots can be traced to the Lucumi, L-U-C-U-M-I, Lucumi religion, which was practiced by the Yoruba tribes of modern-day Benin in Nigeria. In other words, voodoo. Slaves from West Africa were imported to Cuba in the 17th century, and they brought their religious traditions with them. And the slaves were banned from practicing their religious traditions, so they disguised their gods as Catholic figures and continued to pray to them as they pleased. As such, in Santeria, which means the way of the saints, Santeria means the way of the saints, Catholic saints represent voodoo divine beings, again known as Orishas. For centuries, Santeria, which was also known as Regla de Ocha, was practiced in secret, but it survived from one generation to another. And after the revolution, Santeria was openly acknowledged but was criticized by the government as folksy witchcraft. In the 1980s, there was a resurgence in the interest of Santeria, and today it enjoys widespread appeal throughout much of Cuba. It's estimated that up to 80% of the Cuban populations follows some Santeria practices. Again, they synchronize it with other religions. We actually, when we were in Cuba, we actually had a guy who came to us and said he was a practicer of voodoo, and he wanted us to go bless his house and kick the evil spirits out that were there, and we did. It was quite interesting, but we went through the house and we prayed against the evil spirits that were there and against the voodoo gods and the Orishas, and most of it took part in Spanish, so I didn't know a lot of what was being said and done.
And the
But
lights went out.
the lights went out. That was the night the lights went out in Cuba. Fidel Castro was even rumored to be a believer. That may be in part to an auspicious event that happened during his victory speech on January 8th, 1959. I wasn't even born yet. When Fidel was addressing the crowd, 2 doves flew over the podium and one landed on his shoulder. Doves are a symbol of Obatala, the Son of God in Santeria, the Jesus of Santeria. Not surprisingly, many people took this as a sign that God wanted Fidel to lead Cuba. You remember that? My wife was born, I wasn't born. The combining of concepts and terminology from the different religions, in this case from Catholicism and from Lucumi religion, is called religious syncretism. And it's in the minds of many Cubans, the 2 religions parallel one another. They're the same religion, rather than existing as one unified religion. So they don't see contradictions in the 2 faiths. Practicers attend Catholic Mass and even baptize their children, while also practicing forms of Santeria, Lucumi, and voodoo in their home. In the house of a Santero, a Santerian priest, you might find statues of Catholic saints alongside Orisha symbols. Now, the Santeria followers believe that one God created the universe, and that is in the world, and is cared for by lesser divine gods known as Orishas. So again, you're seeing the same in voodoo as you are in Santeria. They have lots of gods, like the Greek pantheon, and they have Orishas represent various forces of nature along with certain human characteristics. I'm not going to go into what all the people believe. We talked about that in the different Orishas. But the Orishas are thought to perform miracles and can be blamed for unfortunate events, and if an individual has consistently bad luck, they must appease their Orisha to achieve harmony and balance in their life. And the followers, however, can't communicate directly with these beings. They need a Santeria priest known as Babalawas, B-A-B-A-L-A-W-O-S. They act as intermediaries in the religion. They interpret the will of the gods using divination, which involves elaborate ceremonies which include drums, rum, cigars, and animal sacrifice. The relationship with the Santeros is also beneficial to the Orishas. They only continue to exist if humans worship them. So stop worshiping them and they'll go away. But they are not mortal, but they depend on human sacrifice for survival. Strolling the streets of Cuba, you occasionally come across people wearing all white clothing. Chances are these people are going through their Santeria initiation. People of all ages can follow Santeria with the initiation process that sets the followers on La Regla de Ocha, or the way of the Orisha. I don't speak foreign languages, so it's really hard. The initiations are ritualistic and involve elaborate ceremonies. Followers are required to stay inside at night for an entire year and dress only in white. No one is allowed to touch the follower aside from families or lovers. At least you get your loving. Every follower is assigned to an Orisha, a god, who will guide them through his or her life. There are about 400 Orishas, but only 20 of them are regularly worshipped in Cuba. There's Uxan, who wears yellow and is associated with the Virgin de la Caridad, the Virgin of Charity. If you visit the El Cobre Cathedral, you'll see followers sporting yellow clothes and wearing yellow and white beads as in homage to Oshun. There's Chango, another popular saint, the saint of fire and water. He's often seen carrying a double-headed axe, which is associated with red and white. His Catholic avatar is Santa Barbara. There's Obatala, the goddess of creation and peace, dressed in white and associated with the Virgin Mary. The Virgin of Mercy. There's Yamea, who rules the oceans and its goddess of motherhood. Not surprisingly, she wears blue and white and is associated with the Virgin de Regla. Santeros often have statues of saints in their home and even altars where pastries, candles, fruits, and coins are offered to the different Orisha. I told you, every one of these deities has a color, a food, an item, all these things, and you must appease them. There are no official churches or temples in the religion. As such, ceremonies are rituals are usually performed at home or in public spaces. And it's not unusual to see altars set up in people's homes. Skimming through a whole bunch of stuff here because a lot of it is just duplication from the different religions. So, they're talking about tourists who go there to see them. So the 7 African powers. The 7 African powers. There are said to be 17,000 Orisha deities. Chief among them are the 7 African powers. The main Orisha focused on both practitioners and laypersons alike. So the first one is Papa Legba, also known as Ilegua, Ilegia, the trickster, the opener of the way, and the guardian of the crossroads, both physical and spiritual. He's compared to Hermes or Mercury in the European traditions, but Legba makes it impossible. He makes the impossible possible. He lifts us up beyond limitations we impose on ourselves in daily life. He is identified with portrayals of St. Peter and St. Nicholas. His favorite offering is candy and tobacco and coconuts. You have to ask him to carry your words to the other Orishas. He's the first one you ask. He's the bottom rung.
Wow.
You have Obatala. And again, you're going to get a little variation from the different sects of Voodoo on these same names of these gods. And also Obatalia, the female. From the same root word as Obia, the mother, father responsible for creation in our physical bodies, literally chief of the white cloth. In integration of all colors into one, as found in the white light shields, for example. Obatala's help is sought in ethical dilemmas and the problems of self-discipline. He is generally identified with the crucified Christ. Obatala is androgynous and sometimes depicted very old, sometimes quite young. Obatala taught the people how to do Ifa, the table of divination. He is gentle, a sky god, but corresponds to Dambala, the primordial serpent as well. Notice the heavy rings of integrated opposites in his being, such as mother, father, androgynous, young and old, dark and light, good and evil, right and wrong, paralleling such deep religious themes and concepts. of Sunyata. Then you have Yamea, also known as Yamalia, Yamala. This is the mother, literally mother of fishes. She rules birth and the surface of the oceans and works closely with Olokun, who rules the depths. She works through dreams and intuition. Her waves wash away sorrow. Her compassion nurtures her children through any spiritual and emotional crisis. Her love sustains, and she's identified with Mary, star of the sea. Number 4 is Oshun, O-S-H-U-N, also known as Ochum, the goddess of love and abundance. The power of desire is hers, and she often uses this power to transform. She is beauty, laughter, and generosity. The erotic is her sacrament. She is often compared to Aphrodite. She is identified with the portrait of Our Lady of Caridad. Oshun likes to heal hurt with love and plant seeds of change in people. Oshun is also associated with Ibukoli, the vulture. It is said in ancient days, Oludumare and Olofi became disgusted with humans, and their behavior, turning away from their needs and prayers. And resources were depleted and famine spread throughout the world. As far as Oludumare and Olifri were concerned, the human race could end forever. Starting to see some Noah's Ark in here? Because vultures fly higher than any other winged bird, Oshun transformed herself into the form of a vulture in order to fly to the heavens and intercede on behalf of humans and save her children. Oludumare, the head god in Vudan, was so compelled by such a spiritual virtue that he fulfilled her request. Number 5 is Oya. The revolution and constant progress. Oya brings sudden change. She's a whirlwind, an Amazon, a huntress, a wild buffalo. Lightning and rainbows are signs of her presence. She also rules communication between the living and the dead. Think of Hecate or Artemis. She's identified mostly with Saint Catherine. The Spanish name for Saint Catherine is Santa Catalina. And interestingly enough, La Catalina, who is cited as having similar powers and attributes of Oya, was the name of the infamous sorcerer that bedeviled both Don Juan Matus and Carlos Castaneda. I'm sure I'm butchering these names, but I'm sorry. Number 6 is Chango. Chango, also known as Shango. Chango is a king, and his name is synonymous with justice. He lived in historical times and ruled as the 4th Alafin, or chieftain, of Oyo, a city in modern-day Nigeria. He is a knight in shining armor. He uses lightning and thunder to enhance the fertility of the earth and of his followers. Myths concerning his death, or rather the fact that it did not occur, link him to the European figure of a hanged god. He is identified with representations of Santa Barbara as well. Number 7 is Ogunu, O-G-O-U-N. Also Ogum, god of Arn and machine. Ugion is a smith, a soldier, and a politician. In modern times, he's been known as the patron saint of truck drivers. He is the spirit of the frontier, cutting paths through the wilderness with his ever-present machete. Although Ugron clears the way for civilization, he does not. He does through constraints. The more spiritual aspect of the small path, one-on-one approach of the machete, rather than the broad stroke, abusive of the Arn and machines. He often prefers to dwell alone and seeking solace in meditation, doing hard time in Zen ministry, okay? So it's identified with St. Anthony. So, and they have these lovely pictures here of these guys with their, look, I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, each different Caribbean island had its own. There's a lot there, but the last thing I want to tell you about is Brujeria. B-R-U-J-E-R-I-A, Brujeria. And it's the practice of Mexican and Mexican-American witchcraft in a voodoo relationship. Brujeria embraces gender equality. Male witches are called brujos, and female witches are called brujas. In the past, they were generally more brujos than brujas, but in recent surge of brujeria, the expression of feminine power has resulted in more female priests.
Bruja is the word witch in Spanish.
There you go. Brujeria is an unspoken lineage tracing back to the prehistoric magical practices of the Mexica civilization that formed in now what is called Aztec or Mayan. Brujeria did not come to America. It's always been the practice with the people living in the southern western part of the United States through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. In addition to its Mexican and Spanish roots, brujeria absorbed components of Judeo-Christianism, European witchcraft, Greek philosophy, hoodoo, Haitian voodoo, and Arabic healing practices. It does not follow Wiccan concepts of harming none or the threefold law, but instead judges a magical work as justified or not justified. So just so you know, there is that's going on in our southern western place as well. There's one more sect I want to tell you about, but I'm not going to give you too much information. But it is the worst of the voodoo sects. It is called Abaquah. Abaquah is the most vicious, malevolent form of voodoo. In Abaquah, you torture animals, people, to the extreme to create Ashe, your power. They believe that if they torture people enough, and I'm talking about seriously torturing people. I'm not talking about just killing people or sodomizing them. I'm talking about hanging them from hooks, beating them, castrating them. I mean, all kinds of sodomy. I mean, you just have to imagine the most horrific torture you could ever imagine in your life.
Is that what was happening in Matamoros?
That's what was happening in Matamoros. If you go back to 1989, Matamoros, Mexico, where Mark Kilroy, a nice normal kid who went on spring break down to Mexico, from the University of Houston, yeah, I mean, look, he stumbled into this world of drug cartels and this nightmare, this hellish religion. It's a mishmash of Santeria, African voodoo, ancient Aztec rites, and human sacrifice. He was a pre-med student at the University of Texas. His three friends parked their car in Brownsville, and they walked to the Mexican side. They got drunk. They were walking back after a night of partying on spring break. He went to the side to relieve himself while his friends continued to the car. He was picked up by people who pretended to be federales, Mexican police, and he was taken into these drug cartels where I'm not even going to talk about what they did to him because it's too horrific. I can deal with it, 30 years in the police department. You know, I read the reports that came out of Mexico. I saw the films, the pictures. By the time they were done, there was tens of bodies on this property of these people. So what happened was these guys who were these drug dealers, they thought, well, in order to beat the federales, they have to torture and just literally destroy people and take their ashe, their power.
Makes them invisible.
It makes them invisible, so they thought. And they got caught. And let me just say this. It was so bad, what they found in the shed was so bad that the federales didn't even want to go in there. They brought these guys out of prison and made them go into the place to bring the cauldrons of blood and body parts and everything out to them. And then they burned the place down eventually. But they found many, many dead bodies that had been so brutally tortured. And these guys, the whole time they're even digging up these bodies, the whole time they're bringing this stuff out, they don't think they're going to get in trouble for any of this because they have the ashe that went with these horrific killings and destructions of people. Anyway, it was all started, this little group was all started by a guy who was a homosexual who came down to that part of Mexico to make movies. He was an actor. But yeah, so this part, all of this stuff, It said, after a 5-hour interrogation, Little Seraphine described how gang members had lured the drunken college students into their truck. After a night of torture and sodomy, they lopped off his head with a machete and boiled his brains. It was all part of a ritual known as Palo Mayombe, a violent voodoo that originated in Africa. Police found this horrific bit of evidence in a kettle that had all the earmarks of being a cauldron for black magic and a shack filled with bloody relics of ritual slaying. So I'm not going to say more than that, but it was started by this good-looking guy who was a model. His name was Costanzo. He was really deep into this occult practice. He grew up with it as a kid with his parents, and they did all kinds of animal and human sacrifice. You can go online, if you do a search of the Spring Break Revelry turns into Mexican drug lords, University of Texas kid killed in horrific sacrifice of voodoo ritual. There's actually a 30-minute video that you can watch. It's not, it's going to show things you don't want to see, but the police officer, the American police officer who worked with the Mexican police to discover what happened to this kid who was, this Mark Kilroy, who was abducted by this cult and just tortured with so many other people. It's an interesting 30-minute story. It'll hold your interest, trust me. But you're going to have to do it on your own. We're not going to do that here. But this was probably the most vile and vulgar part of this practice of voodoo, this abacoa, where, again, the more torture, the more pain, the more suffering, the more everything they put you through, the more power they get. And they thought eventually it would make them so powerful they'd be invisible to the federales and be able to continue with their drug cartel without any problems from the law. But it ended after this kid was abducted, and Costanzo was killed with his lover in a closet. They were shot by one of his underlings, who, because he told him, he said, kill me, kill me, kill me, and they shot him like 25 times. Him and his lover were found there. But yeah, this was really, really horrific. So that is an overview of voodoo. Voodoo, abacoa, obeah, all kinds of stuff. And again, the reason it's so important for us to know this stuff is because it keeps getting synchronized with Catholicism or Christianity. And we have to understand how we can break the two apart. So next week, Mark is going to teach you how to break it apart. He's going to show you pictures, which you'll enjoy, of all these different deities and their candles and their little artifacts. And if you have any questions, be sure to type them in so Mark can answer them for you. But we're also going to learn how to witness to these guys and how to prove to them that what they're doing is completely against God's will. A lot of it will come out of Deuteronomy, Leviticus. God says, do not honor me the way they honor their gods, for what they do is detestable to me. And so we want to make sure that we present ourselves honoring the true God. Again, there's so much, when you look at these cults and these false religions, you see so much integration between Eastern religion and voodoo and the Greek religion. I mean, it's just, there's such a pantheon of stuff. They take just enough from the Bible to try to lure Christians into it, or they try to give you something that'll, like for women who want power in the pulpit. You know, they will take you off on a tangent to find what you're looking for, which is power. Did any questions come in, Deanna?
No, I think people are shocked.
As was I. I only gave you about 30 pages of the 72 I had. So there's a lot to voodoo, there's a lot of different sects, but they basically practice a lot of the same stuff, and it's basically always synchronized with Catholicism. So
I would say, based on the comments, just pray that people are protected and that we can all sleep at night, not being affected by this.
Right.
that was my whole career,
We're good.
30 years of
We're good.
policing. Oh God, can I sleep tonight, please?
Right. Yeah. The
So
Madam Lewis thing really hit us hard.
the Matamoros thing was tough because
Monica had gone to take.
Monica our daughter had been in Matamoros. She would go down there for spring break and that kind of stuff. Yeah, but again, that is the most horrific kind of abaquah, if you want to look it up. I didn't want to teach too long on it because it's just too evil, too horrific, too disgusting. And so, but it's out there, and you need to know what's out there. Okay? Now, yes, Jackie?
Because you said that there was no...
Yes, there are people here.
There was no text, there's no ethical or moral basis for things. So how do people from these backgrounds reconcile, like, where do they get a sense of morality from at all? Like, why do they follow any laws?
Well, you have some groups of voodoo, like Santeria, which wouldn't even probably consider itself voodoo, although it is, because it shares a lot of the same characteristics with other voodoos. But they say they're a benevolent practice. They only cast good spells, and they only want to do good things.
Kind of.
White magic, yes. And then you have all the way to abaquah, and everything in between. So I would say that their sense of morality comes from just their understanding of the world around them. But when you got to one group, either be very good or be very bad. Whatever you're supposed to be it to the best you can. And there was no moral equivalent to evil or good. It just was. So if you're supposed to be evil, be really evil. If you're supposed to be good, be really good. But they get it from their own understanding of things. So remember that Saturday, our service Saturday, since you guys have not sent me any bad things about Mark, Indiana, will be an installation service as well as our Shavuot fish fry. If you plan on coming, you need to send me a message or there won't be fish for you. We are going to have dinner at 5 p.m. on time, 5 p.m. And services will start at 6 p.m. Rick is leading worship and Mark is giving the Shavuot presentation. So if you plan on coming, we are hoping to do it outside. Pray that the rain doesn't come. They're calling for rain Saturday, but we are planning on having an outdoor service as we are allowed. And so we want to make sure that, you pray hard that the rain doesn't come. But if it does rain, we've got the whole building and we can spread out throughout the whole building for the service. So anyway, let me know if you plan on being here. We will have fried fish and baked fish, and we're asking that everyone who comes bring a side, salad, or dessert to share with everybody and to show up promptly at 5 p.m. or right before 5 p.m. Show up at like 4:45 so we can get all the food arranged so that people can share all the food. Nothing irritates me more than when I've been through the buffet line and I'm full and then someone brings in something I like because it just makes me angry. Don't make the rabbi angry. When the rabbi's happy, everybody's happy.
And let us know by tomorrow if you're coming.
Yeah, please let us know if you're coming. Mark's going to make his famous macaroni and cheese, so just come for that. So, but if you can, you don't have to bring something, but if you can, bring something to share. We have masks and sanitizer for everyone. We have spared no expense. We have bought the very nice Mishkan HaShofar mask so you can look sharp and advertise your congregation. And we have hand sanitizer for everybody as well. We've been giving away hand sanitizer. We've been refilling your bottles. So if you need some, stop by and let us fill it and get more, okay? And with that, I am going to pray because it's already 9:03. We're supposed to stop at 9. Gracious and Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, that we know the real God of the universe, the real Creator, the name above all names, and His Son, Yeshua. We thank you, Father, that you protect us, that you guide us, that you guard us, that, Father, we are safe because evil cannot inhabit us where the Holy Spirit lives. We thank you for that spiritual protection through the Ruach, who, although, Father, we can allow evil to have an influence in us, it cannot inhabit us. We cannot be possessed by evil. So, Father, we're praying for protection over all of your people. We're praying, Father, that you would protect us from any spells, incantations, divinations, anything that somebody would like to place on us, and that you protect our minds, Father, from the knowledge that we are acquiring of these different cults and religions that are so false and so horrible, Lord. We know that you are a God of love, a God of mercy, a God of grace, and we thank you for that relationship. So, Father, as you watch over your people, continue to grow them and mature them, as 1 Peter says, make sure they have a reason for the hope that they have in their salvation, so that, Father, we cannot be destroyed by the outside world, as we are always protected by your Holy Spirit. We love you and we thank you, Father, in the precious name that makes it all possible, the one who died on the cross for us, the name Yeshua. Amen. All right, beloved, we will see you Saturday at the Raceway, or, Michigan. So let us know if you're coming, and let us know soon so we can plan best for it, okay? All right, God bless you. We love you. Arrivederci.
All right, and you've got good comments on the new mask.